The first shot woke William from a hard sleep. He sat up in bed, cotton sheets twisted around his legs, listening to the silence that followed. Maybe he dreamed it. Then came the second shot, unmistakable, a rifle crack that cut through the dawn air like a blade. William's feet found the cold floorboards before his mind caught up. 62 years on this earth, 30 of them alone on this farm, and he knew exactly where that sound had come from. The barn. He pulled on his jeans and boots, not bothering with a shirt despite the October chill. The old Remington shotgun hung above the mantel, untouched for years but still loaded. His hands remembered its weight. Outside, the world was painted in half-light. Dew clung to the overgrown grass that surrounded the farmhouse. 50 acres of land stretched out around him, most of it fallow now. The barn stood 100 yards away, its weathered red paint peeling like a sunburn. 3 more shots rang out in quick succession. William moved across the yard with the careful steps of a man who knows his land but expects trouble. The shotgun hung at his side, his finger resting outside the trigger guard the way his father had taught him. His father. The thought came unbidden, along with the stories the old man used to tell. Confederate gold buried somewhere on this property. A fortune hidden from Union soldiers, waiting for the right man to find it. William had dismissed those tales as an old man's fancy, a dream to ease the bitterness of defeat that still lingered generations later. The barn door stood half open. William paused, listening for movement inside. Nothing but the soft nickering of his old mare, Sadie, disturbed by the commotion. "Who's there?" he called out, voice steady despite the hammering in his chest. No answer came. William pushed the door wider with the barrel of his shotgun. Morning light spilled through the high windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. The smell of hay and horse and aged wood filled his nostrils. No intruders. No sign of trouble except for the fresh bullet holes that peppered the far wall. William lowered his shotgun and approached the wall. 6 holes in total, each one clean through the ancient wood. Not random, he realized as he studied them. They formed a pattern, almost like a map. The thought was ridiculous, but it stuck. William ran his fingers over the splintered edges of one hole. The wood was still warm. Something fluttered in his peripheral vision. A piece of paper nailed to the inside of the barn door. William turned, squinting in the dim light to make out the words written in a tight, unfamiliar scrawl. "Your father knew where it was buried. So did your brother. Now the secret passes to you. Follow where the bullets lead." William tore the note from the nail, reading it twice more. His brother. Dead 43 years now, buried in his Confederate uniform as he'd requested. They'd barely spoken in the years after the war, a silence built on choices neither could unmake. He folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. Outside, the sun had cleared the tree line, casting long shadows across the yard. William scanned the perimeter of his property, searching for any sign of the shooter. Nothing moved except the branches of the old oak trees that lined the eastern fence. Back in the house, William pulled a shirt over his head and put on a pot of coffee. The note lay on the kitchen table before him, its message both threat and invitation. He hadn't thought about the treasure in years, not since his father's deathbed, when the old man had gripped his wrist with surprising strength and whispered, "The gold is still there, boy. Your birthright." William had nodded, humoring a dying man. But now, the coffee percolated, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma. William stared out the window at the barn. Who would come onto his property, fire 6 precise shots into his barn wall, and leave a cryptic note about a treasure most people thought was just a legend? After breakfast, William returned to the barn with a ladder and a piece of chalk. He marked each bullet hole with a circle, then stepped back to study the pattern from a distance. 6 points that could indeed form a crude map, if you knew what you were looking for. William spent the morning searching through the old trunk that contained what remained of his father's possessions. Letters, mostly, and a few photographs. A pocket watch that no longer kept time. A leather-bound Bible with names and dates inscribed inside the cover. Nothing that looked like a map or directions to buried treasure. As the day wore on, William found himself returning to the barn, studying the bullet holes from different angles. The shooter had known exactly what they were doing. These weren't warning shots or acts of vandalism. They were a message. By late afternoon, William had worked up enough courage to pry loose one of the boards containing a bullet hole. Behind it, wedged into the frame of the barn, he found a small metal box. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside lay a folded piece of parchment, brittle with age, and a Confederate button, tarnished almost black. William unfolded the parchment carefully. It was a hand-drawn map of the property, but with landmarks that no longer existed: an old well, a stone fence, a carriage house. At the center, marked with an X, was a spot near what appeared to be the oak grove. The sound of tires on gravel pulled William from his thoughts. He tucked the map into his shirt pocket and moved to the barn door. A black pickup truck he didn't recognize had pulled into his drive. A man stepped out, tall, lean, maybe 40 years old, with dark hair and the confident stride of someone used to getting his way. "Mr. Hargrove?" the man called out, approaching with his hand extended. "Name's Daniel Cartwright. Hope I'm not intruding." William didn't take the offered hand. "You're on private property." Cartwright's smile didn't falter. "Yes, sir. I know that. I'm actually here about a matter concerning your family history. May I have a moment of your time?" Something in the man's tone set William on edge. "What kind of family history?" "The kind that gets buried." Cartwright's eyes flicked toward the barn behind William. "I see you've had some excitement this morning." William's hand instinctively moved to his pocket, feeling the outline of the map. "You know something about that?" "Let's just say I'm interested in the same thing as whoever fired those shots." Cartwright's smile tightened. "I'm a historian, Mr. Hargrove, specializing in Civil War artifacts and lost causes." The emphasis on those last words wasn't lost on William. "There's nothing here for you." "I think we both know that's not true." Cartwright took a step closer. "Your great-grandfather was Colonel William Hargrove of the 18th Virginia Infantry. Before the fall of Richmond, he was entrusted with a significant portion of the Confederate treasury for safekeeping. Gold that never made it to its intended destination." William kept his face neutral, though his heart hammered in his chest. "That's just a story, is it?" Cartwright reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. "This is a letter from Jefferson Davis to your great-grandfather, dated April 1865. It references the gold and expresses confidence in the colonel's ability to keep it from falling into Union hands." William didn't reach for the letter. "If you're such a historian, you'd know that most of the Confederate treasury was captured or disappeared after the war. Most, but not all." Cartwright returned the letter to his pocket. "I believe your family has kept this secret for generations, and I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer for the right to excavate certain portions of your property." "Not interested." William turned away. $10,000, Cartwright said to his back. "Just for permission to look. Anything we find, we split 50-50. William paused but didn't turn around. "My land's not for sale or lease." "Good day, Mr. Cartwright. Think about it," the man called after him. "I'll be staying at the motel in town. This offer won't last forever." William waited until he heard the truck drive away before returning to the house. His hand shook as he poured himself a finger of whiskey. He unfolded the map again, studying it more carefully. The oak grove still stood on the eastern edge of his property, though it had thinned over the years. Could the treasure really be there, waiting all this time? As evening fell, William found himself drawn back to the trunk of his father's possessions. This time, he emptied it completely, laying everything out on the kitchen table. Among the items was a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. William had never read them before, respecting his father's privacy even after death. Now, he untied the ribbon. The letters were from his father to his brother, Thomas, during the war. William's throat tightened as he read his father's words, full of worry and love for his Confederate son, even as he expressed growing doubts about the cause. The last letter in the bundle was different, written by Thomas to their father, dated just weeks before his death in 1880. "Father, I cannot bear this burden any longer. The gold was blood money, paid for with the lives of good men on both sides. I have moved it from where you first buried it to a place only a Hargrove would think to look. Let it remain hidden until this land forgets the pain we caused it." William set the letter down, his mind racing. Thomas had moved the gold. The map in the metal box might be outdated. A noise outside startled him, the crack of a branch breaking. William doused the kitchen light and moved to the window. In the moonlight, he could make out a figure moving toward the barn. Grabbing his shotgun, William slipped out the back door and circled around the house. The figure, Cartwright, he was sure, had entered the barn. William approached silently, years of hunting having taught him how to move without being heard. Inside the barn, a flashlight beam danced across the walls. William could hear Cartwright muttering to himself as he examined the bullet holes. "That's far enough," William said, raising his shotgun. Cartwright spun around, his flashlight beam momentarily blinding William. "Mr. Hargrove, I was just trespassing," William finished for him. "Get off my property before I forget my manners." Cartwright lowered the flashlight. "You don't understand what you're sitting on. This isn't just about money. It's about history. It's about theft," William countered. "Those men who died for that gold, they were fighting for something they believed in, misguided as it might have been. That doesn't give you the right to profit from their sacrifice. And you? Cartwright's voice hardened. What gives you the right to keep it buried? Because your name is Hargrove? Because your ancestors fought for the wrong side? The words stung more than William wanted to admit. I'm not keeping anything. I'm respecting my brother's wishes. Your brother? Cartwright laughed. Thomas Hargrove has been dead for nearly half a century. Get out, William said, his finger tightening on the shotgun's trigger guard. Now. Cartwright raised his hands in mock surrender. This isn't over, old man. That gold belongs to history, not to you. He backed toward the door. I'll be back with proper authorization. After Cartwright left, William remained in the barn, his mind churning. He studied the bullet holes again, then looked at the map. Something wasn't adding up. He remembered his brother's words, a place only a Hargrove would think to look. What place would that be? William spent a sleepless night poring over his father's letters and the map. By dawn, he had a theory. Thomas wouldn't have moved the gold far. It would have been too heavy, too conspicuous. It had to be somewhere on the property, somewhere significant to the family. As the first light of morning filtered through the kitchen window, William remembered something, a place he and Thomas had played as boys. A hollow beneath the roots of the largest oak in the grove, their secret hideaway where they'd buried treasures of their own. Marbles, a pocket knife, a Confederate soldier figurine Thomas had carved himself. William pulled on his boots and coat and headed out to the oak grove. The morning air was crisp, the ground hard beneath his feet. The trees stood like sentinels, their leaves turned golden and red with the season. The old oak was easy to find, larger than the others, its trunk gnarled and twisted with age. William knelt at its base, brushing away decades of accumulated leaves and debris. The hollow was still there, though smaller than he remembered, or perhaps he was just larger. He reached inside, his fingers searching the cool earth. Nothing. He dug deeper, disappointment settling in his chest. Then his fingers struck something solid. Not the small box of childhood treasures he'd expected, but something larger, metal. William dug with renewed vigor, uncovering the corner of an iron chest. It took him nearly an hour to excavate it fully, a strong box about 2 feet long and a foot wide, crusted with dirt but still intact. The lock had long since rusted away, but the lid was sealed shut by years of corrosion. William carried it back to the house, his arms straining under the weight. In his workshop, he used a crowbar to pry open the lid. Inside, nestled in rotting cloth, lay rows of gold coins and several small gold bars, each stamped with the seal of the Confederate States of America. William lifted one coin, feeling its weight, watching it catch the light. This was it, the treasure his father had spoken of, that Thomas had hidden, that men had died for. Alongside the gold was a leather-bound journal. William opened it carefully, recognizing Thomas's handwriting. It was a confession of sorts, detailing how their father had come into possession of the gold, how Thomas had fought believing in a cause that he later came to question, and how the weight of that knowledge had haunted him until he could no longer bear it. The final entry read, "I leave this gold where it lies, neither returned nor spent, a testament to the futility of war and the price of pride. May whoever finds it understand its true cost." William closed the journal, his throat tight. He understood now why Thomas had moved the gold, why he'd chosen their childhood hiding place. It wasn't about keeping it safe, it was about burying the past. The sound of vehicles approaching pulled William from his thoughts. He moved to the window. 2 trucks had pulled into his drive, Cartwright's black pickup and another he didn't recognize. 4 men got out, Cartwright among them. William quickly covered the chest with a tarp and went to meet them at the door, shotgun in hand. "Mr. Hargrove," Cartwright called out, his tone falsely pleasant. "I brought some colleagues who are very interested in your property's historical significance." "I told you yesterday," William said, standing on his porch. "Not interested." One of the other men stepped forward. "Sir, I'm Professor James Whitley from the University of Virginia. We have reason to believe your land contains artifacts of immense historical value. We're prepared to obtain a court order if necessary." "On what grounds?" William challenged. "Historical preservation," Whitley replied. "The Confederate gold represents a significant cultural artifact. If it exists on your property, it should be in a museum, not buried in the ground." William's grip tightened on his shotgun. "You have no proof it's here." "Don't we?" Cartwright smirked. "Those bullet holes in your barn form a map. A map we've deciphered. We know it's in the oak grove." William felt a chill run through him. They knew, but they didn't know Thomas had moved it. They'd be searching in the wrong place, at least initially. "This is still private property," William said. "Until you have that court order. You're trespassing." The men exchanged glances. Cartwright nodded slightly to one of the others, a burly man with a scar across his cheek. "We don't have time for legal niceties," Cartwright said. "That gold has historical significance that transcends property rights. We're going to find it, with or without your cooperation." The men started to advance. William raised his shotgun. "That's far enough." They paused, but Cartwright's smile only widened. "You won't shoot us, old man. You can't stop all of us." William's mind raced. They were right. He couldn't hold them off forever. And once they started searching, it was only a matter of time before they found the chest. "Wait," William said, lowering his shotgun slightly. "Let's talk about this reasonably." Cartwright's eyebrows rose in surprise. "I'm listening." "The gold isn't where you think it is," William said. "The map in the barn is outdated. My brother moved it before he died." "And you know where?" Cartwright asked, skepticism clear in his voice. William nodded slowly. "I found it this morning. But before I show you, I want your word that a portion will go to preserving this land as a historical site open to the public." Professor Whitley stepped forward eagerly. "Of course. That's exactly what we want, to share this history with everyone." Cartwright looked less enthusiastic but nodded his agreement. "Fine. Now where is it?" William led them to his workshop, his mind working furiously. He couldn't give them the gold, not just because it was valuable, but because of what it represented. Thomas had been right. This was blood money, a reminder of a cause that had torn families and a nation apart. In the workshop, William pulled back the tarp, revealing the chest. The men crowded around, their eyes wide with amazement. "My God," Whitley breathed. "It's real." Cartwright reached for one of the gold coins, his fingers trembling slightly. "Do you have any idea what this is worth?" "Millions, at least." "I know exactly what it's worth," William said quietly. "My brother did too. That's why he left this." He handed Thomas's journal to Whitley. "Read it. Understand what this gold really means before you decide what to do with it." While Whitley flipped through the journal, Cartwright was already making plans. "We'll need to transport this securely. I have contacts who can authenticate and appraise it without attracting too much attention." "No," William said firmly. "If this goes public, it's going to be done right. The full story told, not just about the gold, but about the men who died for it, and the cause they fought for, misguided as it was." Cartwright's expression hardened. "That's not your decision to make." "It's on my land," William countered. "Found by my family. I think that gives me some say." The tension in the room was palpable. William could see the greed in Cartwright's eyes, the academic excitement in Whitley's. The other two men looked ready for whatever Cartwright ordered. Whitley closed the journal, his expression thoughtful. "Your brother was a complicated man, Mr. Hargrove. This account, it changes things." "How so?" Cartwright demanded. "The historical context," Whitley explained. "This isn't just Confederate gold. It's one man's journey from belief to disillusionment. It tells a story about reconciliation and regret that's rarely captured in our understanding of the post-war South." William nodded. "That's why it can't just be dug up and divided like spoils. It needs to be presented with the full context." Cartwright scoffed. "It's gold. Historical context doesn't change its value." "Actually, it does," Whitley argued. "With this journal, the exhibit would be about more than just recovered treasure. It would be about a family's struggle with the legacy of the Confederacy, a microcosm of the South's own complicated relationship with its past." The argument continued as the day wore on. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The gold would be donated to a museum, with a portion of its value used to establish a historical preservation fund for the Hargrove farm. The journal would be displayed alongside the treasure, telling the full story of Thomas's change of heart. Cartwright was far from happy with the arrangement, but with Whitley and the university backing William's position, he had little choice but to agree. As the men prepared to leave with the chest secured in Whitley's truck, William stood in his yard, watching the autumn sun sink toward the horizon. The weight of generations seemed to lift from his shoulders. Thomas had been right to hide the gold, to wrestle with the legacy it represented. And now, perhaps, some good might come from it after all. That night, William returned to the barn. The bullet holes remained, 6 points of a map that had led not just to gold, but to understanding. He ran his fingers over the splintered wood, feeling the history beneath his touch. Tomorrow, there would be paperwork and arrangements, interviews and explanations. But tonight, in the quiet of his family's land, William made peace with the past. He took Thomas's letters and his father's possessions back to the old oak tree. There, in the hollow where the gold had rested, he buried them, not as a treasure to be found, but as a memory laid to rest. The wind rustled through the leaves overhead, carrying with it the whispers of generations. William stood, brushing dirt from his hands, and walked back toward the house. Behind him, the oak stood sentinel, keeper of secrets now told, guardian of a legacy redeemed.